the important message is to really be kind to yourself. We're all going through life and life will have its ups and downs, but really being kind with yourself throughout is so important so that you can navigate everything.
Welcome to the Core Happiness Podcast. I'm your host, Kacee Banks, a mindset and positive psychology coach. On this podcast, we discuss all things related to creating happiness from within. So, let's do it. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Core Happiness. On this podcast, we dive deep into the science and art of living a healthier, happier life. Today, we have an extraordinary guest, Dr. Sydney Tsai. Dr. Tsai is not just any physician. She is an award-winning doctor, a captivating TEDx speaker, a best-selling author, and a visionary wellness consultant. With a rich background trained at Ivy League institutions, Dr. Sydney combines her expertise in internal medicine and integrative medicine to address the root causes of chronic stress. She is also the founder of Yes and More, a personal growth and wellness company dedicated to helping leaders and entrepreneurs release chronic stress patterns through mindfulness and mind-body techniques. She is passionate about preventative health and holistic well-being, aimed to foster a healthier and happier world. Dr. Sydney, welcome. So happy to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
So, Dr. Sydney, can you start by just sharing a bit about your journey and what led you to combine the internal medicine with integrative medicine?
Absolutely. It was because I had my own story and experience with burnout when I woke up one day not being able to see. And that's what I talked about in my TEDx talk, what it was like for the whole room to be dark and blurry and to be a medical mystery. When this first happened, I was in residency training more than 10 years ago, and I was already a physician, but I had no idea what was going on. And I remember going to see the doctors and them not having answers for me. My labs were fine, but I wasn't fine. My prescription actually increased threefold overnight. And to be on the other side as a patient, definitely experiencing the frustration, confusion, hopelessness, challenges, it was really terrifying. And a while later, thankfully, other symptoms came up. And so I did receive a diagnosis. I had a rare autoimmune condition impacting my eyes that could have led to full blindness. And so, of course, I started on all the serious medications like steroids, immunosuppressants, all of that, because I didn't want to be on medications for the rest of my life if I could help it. But I was also motivated to heal. That's when I dove deep into my own healing and embraced integrative and functional medicine, looking at the whole person, the root cause, really taking that holistic mind, body, spirit approach. Thankfully, with that, with bringing in mindfulness, coaching, energy healing, complementary alternative, Chinese medicine, like everything, thankfully, I was able to heal my eyes. I really believed in the importance of looking at the whole person, the whole picture, and wanted to practice in that way and to help others see that the body is capable of healing and that we need to support it as best as we can.
And I will say the TEDx talk that you're talking about, like the body intelligence, is fascinating. And for the listeners who haven't seen it yet, I encourage you to do so. We will link to it in the show notes. But can you give us a brief overview of what body intelligence is and why it is so important?
Absolutely. I titled the talk Body Intelligence because I believe that our bodies are always talking to us.
Yes.
It's always sending us messages, and it's just a matter of whether or not we are paying attention and listening. And when I went through my journey and experience, even though it looked like it was overnight, when I woke up one day not being able to see, it really was an accumulation over time. And one thing I didn't touch on was when I was diagnosed with an autoimmune condition, I had to pause and really ask myself what was going on. And we know that autoimmune conditions come about significant inflammation in the body. I was actually always health conscious. I was young and all of these things. And so for me, a big part of that equation for the inflammation was stress. By the time I was working in residency, working nights, but then during the day, being the overachiever, I would still be volunteering, doing research, drinking caffeine to stay awake, but be so amped up that I wouldn't be able to fall asleep. At night, I'd still be thinking about all the things I didn't do, that I should do, that I have to do. And it just was never ending. And so I bring that up to share that even though it seemed like it was overnight, it was this accumulation of chronic stress over time that erupted in that moment. And so when I talk about body intelligence, it's because I recognize that there were moments when my body was sending messages, different types of pains or aches, like weird ailments, all of that. And it's just a matter of being able to pay attention and to really acknowledge and look deeper and to take care of it so that it doesn't magnify into a crisis, a serious health diagnosis. So I really encourage people to cultivate this relationship with your body so that you can be in optimal health and well-being.
I like that you mentioned the fact that our bodies are always talking to us. I absolutely wholeheartedly believe that. It's so common to just want to push through it, especially for people who are overachievers. Especially in coaching, I get a lot of clients who we have to work on perfectionist tendencies, and they're always striving to meet the certain level of expectation that's usually placed upon ourselves, but keeps you in the high drive. And so a lot of times when you are trying to perform at that high level, it does come with a lot of stress that we may not even realize is happening at the time. I mean, chronic stress is a major issue today. I mean, for what I've just talked about, but then also just kind of the world we're living in, right? Always having to be tethered to our phones, always having to be working. We don't really have a turn-off moment, right? We don't have, or we can log off at the end of the day. So people are constantly working. We have so much stress just in general with occupations. I'm wondering, are there common signs, something that we should look out for when we are dealing with chronic stress?
Yeah, I think it's really important to start with awareness. So even checking in with yourself, simple things like on a scale of 1 to 10, how am I feeling right now? What's my energy level? How stressed am I? For some high performers who are used to having a lot of stress, where they feel like they're not under that much stress, but it's because their threshold is so high because they're so used to operating at that level. And that's actually really concerning because they're that much closer to burnout. We all have a certain capacity. Now, the capacity may vary depending on the person, depending on the day, but it's still finite. So it's really important to know where you are and based on that, be able to adjust, evolve, and things like that. And so I think, of course, there are many different ways to look at it. We hold stress in different parts of our bodies. So I think that's really important to pay attention to. Just even recognizing, where do you hold stress? For me, I hold it in my neck and shoulders. And at the end of the workday, having been on the computer for a long time, sometimes my shoulders are tense. Some people hold it in their stomach, some in their hands, their feet, their legs, like anywhere. It starts with you paying attention to you. So knowing the signs, so simple check-ins, right? Like scales, paying attention to how you're feeling in your body, how you show up in terms of your mental capacity, your emotional well-being. Do you feel you are being more impatient? Are you easily irritated, frustrated? Are you reaching for food all the time? A lot of times people may use food or substances as a coping mechanism, as a distraction, as avoidance. So it's variable depending on the person. But it just starts with noticing where you are. That's why I talk so much about mindfulness and being present, because we can't change what we don't know.
I love that you talk about mindfulness techniques, because in a previous episode, I was talking about how our mind and bodies are connected. There's just no way to separate them. And so what happens in our mind usually shows up in our body. In your experience, you have so much experience in this. What do you feel is the most effective mindfulness or mind and body techniques for releasing chronic stress?
Yeah, there are definitely a lot. The breath is a very simple and practical way to start because there are so many ways that you can breathe that can help, especially when people are busy and don't have a lot of time. Just taking 3 deep breaths can really help to reset your nervous system. When we receive an input into our minds that's interpreted as a stress signal, the input can be anything from our environment, what we see, hear, feel. It can also be our thoughts and what's going on in our minds. And that causes that stress signal to be activated in our brains. And then that activates our sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight. And then that leads to the downstream effects of physical, mental experiences of stress that we'll see output into the body. Tension, anxiety, nausea, like all of these things. I think a big part of it is paying attention. When we are able to take deep breaths, it actually activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which helps us with relaxation and it counters that sympathetic fight or flight. So I would say being able to take deep breaths, really important and a very simple way to really get out of that chronic stress and back into the present moment.
Yeah. And I notice there's sometimes when taking deep breaths, especially when you're in that stressful moment, you don't even realize how shallow your breaths are. You feel like you're breathing, but it's not deep breaths. And so when you take a moment to really take a deep breath from the diaphragm, or like when you kind of do box breathing, but even just kind of counting the inhale and exhalations are so helpful.
Studies have looked at this and why breathing is so powerful. Part of it is because the vagus nerve helps the parasympathetic nervous system. So the vagus nerve comes out of our brain, our heads, through our neck, into our chest. And so when we take a deep breath and when our lungs expand, it oftentimes will rub against the vagus nerve to help activate it, to prompt that relaxation response. And so that's physiologically in the body. There's that piece. And then also having a longer exhale has been shown to stimulate the vagus nerve as well. That's why a lot of the breathing techniques that include counting have a longer exhale, 4-6 breathing, 4-7-8, all these things. There's definitely science backing to it, and that can be helpful for some people to understand and hopefully be more motivated to practicing this.
Absolutely. And I know we talked a lot about performing at a high level because perfectionism is such a big topic, at least in coaching. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit to how self-compassion can play into both noticing chronic stress and what we can do to help prevent it.
So self-compassion is something I talk about all the time. I call myself a recovering perfectionist.
Same.
I was actually voted in my high school yearbook superlative biggest perfectionist. So it definitely is very relevant for me. So self-compassion, I define it as being kind to yourself. It's about being your own best friend and offering yourself compassion, even when things are tough. And I know as a high achiever, as a perfectionist, it's really hard because we are so tough on ourselves. We have such high standards. And part of it has served us well, really, right? Because we are driven, we've been successful. And so that is a part of our identity. When I first came to self-compassion, it did not resonate with me. I was like, what are you talking about? Why do we need to do this? And then I learned more about it. I appreciate Dr. Kristen Neff's framework on self-compassion, where she breaks it down into 3 components: mindfulness, common humanity, and self-kindness. This framework really helped me see the importance of being kind to yourself and how you could actually do it in a very accessible way. If you think about it, the 3 components, mindfulness is about paying attention to the present moment without judgment. So, for example, this would be when you're having a hard time, recognizing that, hey, this is tough. I'm going through a hard time right now. Just even noticing that is important. The second component is common humanity. which is really important because a lot of times I think when we're struggling, we feel like we are all alone.
Mm-hmm.
And we may have a tendency to isolate, to retreat, and that can be even more detrimental when we don't have that support. So the common humanity piece reminds us that we are all human. We're all going through this experience called life with its ups and downs. And so that's a really helpful grounding anchor. And the third component is self-kindness, which is really about being kind to yourself and offering you the support, the love, the compassion, whatever it is that you need in that moment. I find that a lot of times we are quick to offer this to others, to our friends, our loved ones, if they're struggling, having a hard time, but we have a much harder time bringing it to ourselves. So, this framework is really important and helpful to start this process of being kind to yourself. I think that when you talk about chronic stress and burnout, people get stuck in this cycle where they are working all the time, doing all the things, and it never ends. They feel like they have to keep going and keep going. And how I see self compassion as being an important part of this process is because when you can really notice what's going on, when you recognize you're not alone, when you can be kind to yourself, then you can really pause and recharge and reset so that you're essentially interrupting the cycle so you don't keep heading towards or staying in burnout.
Could not agree more. And I think interrupting the cycle is the important part there too, because a lot of times with burnout, we have our own expectations that we're trying to meet, but then we also want to show up for others. Sometimes it's I'm okay with letting myself down, but I don't want to let anybody else down. I have to maintain this high level of performance to make sure that I'm not letting anyone down. But we have to be kind of ourselves, and we have to think about that common humanity. And also the kindness to ourselves. It's okay to take a break. Sometimes rest is just as important as continuously working hard. To perform at your best, you have to give yourself some recovery time. It's okay to check in with yourself and just notice when you're feeling stressed. And then maybe it's a boundary. I need to put up a boundary here, or I need to carve out specific rest time. But whatever it is that you need, it's okay to address that need.
Absolutely. I think a big part of the process is giving yourself permission.
Absolutely. Do you have any practical tips that you've seen both as a doctor and within your company where, I don't know if it's just ways to incorporate more self-compassion into the daily basis or ways to break the cycle so you can start to think about self-compassion?
Yeah, though the three components that I mentioned earlier, what I appreciate with Kristen Neff is she talks about creating a phrase that represents each of those components and having that written down clearly somewhere as a reminder, I think is very powerful because the more you see it, the more it prompts your brain to be in that place of compassion. So, for example, phrases for mindfulness would be like, I'm having a hard time right now. This is tough. Like anything that helps you notice what is to get you in the present moment. And then the second phrase of common humanity is something like, I'm not alone. This happens to everyone. Things like that to really help remind you that you are a human and that this is what happens in life. There will be ups and downs. And then the third piece of self-kindness, it could be something like, may I be kind to myself, or I was trying my best, stuff like that to really bring that sense of kindness and being gentle with yourself. So what I like to do, and also with clients, is bring them through the exercise, come up with these individual personalized phrases so that they can see it regularly, say it to themselves, so that it becomes more ingrained and normalized. A lot of times people ask, well, what if I'm okay? I say that's even better. We want to be practicing this all the time. We have to start with small steps, and that's what's going to build momentum for us to be able to handle big challenges. If we never practice, we're not going to be able to handle it. It's really a practice and a process.
Yeah. And I think that's important too, the phrasing, because a lot of times it's the negative self-talk that keeps us in that cycle. And part of breaking that cycle is interrupting that negative self-talk when it happens. And those phrases are a key way to do that. And then when you talk about making it something we should be practicing all the time, the more that we do things, it becomes more habitual, and then it starts to become part of our everyday lives. I wanted to talk to you about that because I know making happiness your default is the saying of yours when it comes to joyful living. And I know that you're very passionate about joyful living, and a lot of this plays into that. But what does making happiness your default mean to you?
For me, it's continued to evolve over time. And I encourage everyone to think about that for themselves as well. Because I always say every person, every body is different. So the things you need are different. And depending on the season of life you're in, it's going to vary, and giving yourself permission to do that. And I think about it as having a set point every single day. And whatever that set point baseline is, it tends towards happiness, joy, positivity, gratitude. And I say that because it's not that life doesn't have its ups and downs, but the importance is looking at the majority of how you're feeling in your day. So what I mean by that is, and majority is anything over half. Even if 51% of your day is spent in gratitude and joy and love and happiness, it's going to tilt the balance that way. And that's what's going to prevail. But a lot of times when we get into that negative spiral, the harmful self-talk, it just drags us down more and more. And then we get into worry, guilt, shame, anger, all of those emotions that can really weigh on us. So for me, it's about being in a place of gratitude and looking for all the things that are working and being in that place of trust. And every day it's a practice. It's like hygiene. And I think that's really important for people to recognize. It's easier for me now than years ago, but it's still a practice. And it's something that is important. I think if you want to continue to grow and evolve, it's a commitment and a discipline.
I love the fact that you said that it changes. I mean, we all know that happiness is subjective, and my definition will change from your definition. But I've seen where a lot of people are hard on themselves because they're wanting to maintain a sense of who they were, but not really acknowledging that you're going to be changing and evolving and growing. So a lot of what's important to you or your core values or your morals change over time. So your definition of happiness will change over time. And I absolutely love that you said that. And that also goes back to giving yourself permission, like you said as well. But I think that that's very important to establish is not only can you define what happiness means to you, but it's okay if that definition also changes over time.
And I think it's really giving yourself permission and space to be authentic and honest with yourself. It takes courage to do that because a lot of times, especially as high achievers, as perfectionists, we've really absorbed a lot of conditioning and expectations from society, from externals, from all kinds of influences around us. So I think this is also a practice of sitting with yourself and exploring your priorities, your values, and what that really looks like, your vision, what it is for you, and leaning into that.
You talk a lot about surviving to thriving. And I think when you just said courage, that seems like one of the most important steps. But I'm curious if somebody's just beginning out on the wellness journey and they're trying to figure out how to go from a feeling of overwhelmed and struggling and like, I just can't find joy. And I want to begin this wellness journey and I want to start this transformation. What would you say are some initial steps that you can take in addition to having the courage to be self-compassionate and make space for yourself? What are some additional steps?
I would say that first, you don't have to do this alone. I think that's really important to know, to seek support, help, guidance. And especially now in this day and age, we're so fortunate to have all these resources at our hands, right?
Yeah.
Podcasts, videos, YouTube, books. programs, courses, all of these things. And so I think there's low barrier to entry in that way in terms of having those things as support, but also the importance and value of having a team, having experts, having therapists, coaches, healers to work with you so that you can be held in this transformation, I think is so important and powerful. I'm grateful to have had many teachers, healers, coaches, therapists who I've worked with and continue to. I'm sure I would not be here had it not be for them because we all have blind spots, right? And I think that's the challenge when you try to do this all yourself, you just get stuck because you're so used to seeing things from your perspective. Whereas when there's a coach coming in, it's like they come in from the 30,000 view, right? And they can see all the other different paths, opportunities, and to be able to help guide you. So I would say that it's twofold, definitely internally and self-motivating, finding resources to start and to see what speaks to you. So many different resources, so many different personalities, so many different thought leaders, and different things will speak to different people. And so really honor that, even though a lot of times the message content may be similar, for whatever reason, this person needs to hear it in this way, and that works. And that's great. There's no wrong way to do this. I would say really honor that, honor what resonates with you, and really trusting that you're on your path and journey and that we all are on our own paths and journeys. It's going to be different depending on where you are, but it's going to be beautiful. It's going to be just fine.
One word you just said that painted such a beautiful image was held. I mean, we know that having a support system is very important, especially when you are going on a transformative journey such as wellness and mental health, physical health. Like support is always a great thing to have. But when you said having the system to hold you, yes, it takes courage to decide to even go on a wellness journey and to reach out and find resources. But then when you have a very strong support system that is holding you, I thought that was a very beautiful image. And I know that you just said that you've gone through your own, like you have your own support system. And I'm wondering, do you have any daily habits, whether it's when you're feeling stressed or if it's a mind body or any type of thing that you do as a ritual or routine that you find effective?
Yeah. So for me, a morning routine is really important. I keep my phone on airplane mode. When I wake up, I'm not distracted by messages or notifications. I really set aside time for my meditation, for my gratitudes, for my intentions. And that really is helpful for me to set the day up when I feel prepared and ready to start the day. It's not so overwhelming for me. Throughout my day, I try to take breaks between meetings, go out for a quick walk, see the sun, like all of these things I think are so important. And of course, being able to move your body, some type of exercise or walk, eating clean, healthy, drinking water to stay hydrated, all of that stuff. I mean, it sounds simple, but these are the important foundations that I think really set us up well, take care of ourselves.
Yeah, it's funny because it sounds simple, but I find that when you're in the moment of chronic burnout or just super stressed, those are the first things to go. It's like, oh, I don't have time to take a break or walk around, or, oh, I didn't even realize I didn't drink any water today. It's funny. Oh, those are the first things to go, but yet they're so important. I absolutely love that. Your energy blueprint is a free resource that you offer. I love it. Can you tell us more about what it includes and how someone can boost their energy levels?
Yes. So I created this energy blueprint. It's called the So Much Better Energy Blueprint. And it's a free guide with 3 ways to help you gain more energy without overdosing caffeine. I created it because I work with high performers, and a lot of times it's easy to reach for caffeine and stimuli to keep you going. And for me, especially with my medical background and looking long term, caffeine is not a sustainable solution. I wanted to provide a way for people to gain more energy. So that's a simple guide with practical tools and ways to help people gain awareness and opportunities to gain more energy.
Yeah. And I'm definitely going to link to it in the show notes. I'm a person who I have no tolerance at all for caffeine. I can't drink sodas. I certainly can't do coffee. I can do a little bit of green tea, but I can't do caffeine. And so I'm always looking for like, how do you boost your energy naturally or without any type of stimuli? So I'm so happy to share that with the listeners because I think that is a great resource. So thank you so much for that. One thing I wanted to talk to you about is your work with leaders and entrepreneurs. When you founded Yes and More, what inspired you to focus on that group in particular?
So I would say that it's always evolving, as you probably have experienced being an entrepreneur. A lot of times entrepreneurs have a lot of great ideas. They're multi-passionate and it can feel like you have 10,000 projects that you want to do. And so it's continued to evolve, but I really enjoy working with leaders and entrepreneurs because I believe that we all are here because we have our own gifts to share. And it's only when we are well ourselves can we really use our gifts to make the world a better place. And for me, with what I'm doing, it's because I want to make a bigger impact. And when you can help the leaders, the entrepreneurs who are also doing really important, great things, making an impact, creating change, that creates a ripple effect so that we can all win together. We are all supporting, we are all growing together. And so for me, that's really why I primarily focus on working with leaders and entrepreneurs because I find that a lot of them have so much reach and impact. It's not just for me, it's for me to be able to share and to teach other people and for them to teach and share others and to really give back. That's why I really love working with these people.
That's so fantastic. And I will say, I found that when you are an entrepreneur, or at least in the entrepreneur groups I'm a part of, a lot of people get into it to be of service in some way. Very rarely do you find a company or a person who's in service to those who are in service. So it's actually support for those who are in service. So I absolutely love that you focus on that particular group. And I know you said entrepreneurs have 10,000 ideas, and it's true. And I've also found that with each of those ideas, there's 10,000 to-dos that your to-do list is just ever growing. It seems to never get shorter. And because of that, I'm wondering, with the fast-paced nature of just life in general, or the fast-paced nature of entrepreneurship, how can a busy professional make time for a wellness practice or that space for themselves that we've talked about?
That's a good question because I think a lot of times people who are busy feel like they have no time. And one of the first things I ask people to do is a time audit to be realistic. It's oftentimes very interesting because people will be confronted with what they're actually spending their time on. And, all those random scrolls on social media here and there and all these other things, it adds up. It really does.
Mm-hmm.
And the other interesting thing to think about is a lot of these wellness practices, let's say taking 3 deep breaths, 3 box breaths, whatever, that does not take 10 minutes. It just takes a few minutes at most. And so it's really helping people see that. A lot of times when we think about doing something different, we think it's going to be this drastic change or it requires so much of us. When in reality, we start with the baby steps, right? Because that's what's going to build momentum. And so I think it's really important for people to just recognize like it doesn't take a lot. Having 2 sips of water in between a meeting is a quick thing to do, but it's very important for you, right? For your body to stay hydrated. And so I think it's recognizing it's the little things that matter and starting there. A lot of times, people feel like if they haven't exercised, they got to sign up for a gym membership and go 4 times a week. And I'm always like, let's, just start with something that's doable, something that you can commit to. Because part of this process is we are rebuilding trust with ourselves to show ourselves that we can take care of ourselves. And so it's keeping it simple so that you can actually follow through and do those things. And you'd be surprised. I mean, you might think like taking 3 deep breaths every day intentionally is not going to make a difference. But after a few days, after weeks, like you're going to notice that things have shifted, that your stress levels have decreased. And that's really the best thing that you can do to really build these habits.
I love that you said small things because it's true. Especially if you're an overachiever, you tend to think all or nothing. It's like, well, if I'm going to practice gratitude, I've got to sit here and journal for an hour every day. But it really can be small. And I know for me, it's been very helpful to do habit stacking. And so if I'm going to sit down in the morning and have breakfast or have some tea or something like that, then that's when I'll start doing my gratitude. And it doesn't have to be an hour long, but it might just be like a couple of sentences. But I found that is very helpful. And the other thing that has come up in coaching with a couple of my clients with a time audit is, oh, well, yeah, I realized that I lost an hour and a half in the evening to watching TV, but that's my decompression time. And so a lot of times I'm like, well, what if you just took 15 minutes before you sat down and watched TV and you did some deep breathing? Or let's say you wrote out 3 things that you were grateful for that day. And then usually what happens is that ends up becoming longer because it's more gratifying than just kind of zoning out in front of the TV.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times it gets back to what we were talking about, how in this busy world that we live in, we're living, but we're not present.
Yes.
And we are bombarded by all the stimuli from technology, our devices, notifications, and all of it. It's a lot for anyone, and it's a lot for our nervous system. And so I think a big part is it's really necessary to create space so that you can really rest and receive so much guidance, support, whatever it is, and to really improve your health and well-being.
And I like that you said that you have your phone on airplane mode. Like that's, I think, a perfect example of creating space. And going back to that self-compassion and setting boundaries, I think that's part of it too. It's just like, I'm not going to have my phone on or next to me during a certain amount of time, and creating space in that way so you can be present and you don't have all those distractions. One thing I want to talk to you about also is your book, So Much Better, which has been a bestseller. I was wondering if you could share a key takeaway or maybe just a favorite chapter to give the listeners an idea of what it's about.
Absolutely. The full title is So Much Better: Life-Changing Strategies to Develop Calm, Confidence, and Curiosity to Become Your Own Inspiring Success Story. And so in the book, I break down the 3 pillars of calm, confidence, and curiosity, and sharing different tools and techniques and practices for each of them. So the book is really meant to be a resource that you can reference throughout. It's not one of the things where you just read it once and you're done, because I think depending on whatever we're going through, different things will speak to us. Just to give a bit more of an explanation about the different pillars. So calm is about working with your nervous system so that you can stay calm and grounded no matter what. And we've seen that that's really important for stress, right? A lot of times the issues with chronic stress come because we have this chronically activated nervous system, fight or flight, and that leads to the various downstream health impacts, inflammation, heart disease, all of those things. So being able to stay calm, have ways to stay calm is really important. And that's really about working with the body. Now, confidence is about developing that strong self-belief in yourself, and it's learning to work with your mind, releasing a lot of the limiting beliefs and programming, and really reprogramming your mind for the better. So that's about working with your mind so that you're really in a good place. And curiosity is about tapping into the fun, the play in your life. And a lot of times I find that as we grow older, we oftentimes lose sight with that part of us. And so it's really important to tap into that, to be curious, to bring in the creativity, and to really nurture that. I would say that is very much directly connected to our soul and our spirit. And so looking at the 3 components, it's really about your body, your mind, your spirit, and looking holistically at you as a person. And so that's how I break it down. And I encourage everyone to check it out if they are interested in learning more about deepening this relationship with yourself and to have practical tools and techniques to be well.
Yes, I'm encouraging everyone to check it out. And we will definitely link to that as well. And I love the fact that it's so holistic. With your work that you've done, especially with the book and then obviously with your background, where do you see the future of medicine evolving with an integration of holistic and preventative practices?
I believe that integrative medicine is the future of medicine, and integrative medicine is really about putting the patient at the center of their care and bringing in the traditional approaches that work, but also complementary alternative modalities and looking at the person holistically. And I think about it as having a team-based approach where you don't just have one physician, but you have all these different healers and therapists and professionals who support you, right? Who are experts at what they do, who work together collaboratively. I think that is really the best care when you have a team look at everything that's going on, the root cause, and also focusing more on prevention, being proactive and having those good, healthy habits and really looking more upstream as opposed to being reactive down the line when you get a health diagnosis or illness. I'm hopeful that we're moving towards that.
I have to say that's why I love everything that you do and the work that you do, because you are essentially helping to bridge that future, like create that future for us. And I really hope also that that's where we're headed, because I think that's what we need. We need more of that. We need more people like you and people who are putting the patient first and thinking more preventative as opposed to treating symptoms and not really looking holistically at things. So I just want to say thank you for the work that you do and for all the resources that you share. Again, we'll link to your book as well as your energy handout. And before we go, I want to know if there's anything else that you would like to share with the Core Happiness audience.
Well, I really appreciate being here. And the important message I would share is to really be kind to yourself. I think that we're all going through life and life will have its ups and downs, but really being kind with yourself throughout is so important so that you can navigate everything. And I bring up when I talk about self-compassion, a lot of times people feel like being selfish or you're being weak and you're going to be complacent. And I actually give the example of think about if you had a young child or a family member and they come home from school and they had a really tough time or whatever happened. And as the parent, you can respond in different ways, but you can respond with compassion, with kindness, to really be open and to understand like, hey, what happened? Not making them wrong, but really understanding, right? Whereas on the other hand, you can also respond with criticism, shame, judgment, blame, anger, and just even imagining the scenarios and how the child responds in each of them. I find that the one with compassion, the child is more likely to actually examine what happened, to learn from it, to take the lessons and move forward, as opposed to when the child is shamed, judged, criticized, they just shut down, right? Because they just feel like they're bad, they're wrong, and they don't ever want to look at it again. And so we actually don't learn and grow in those situations. The same thing, I think, with self-compassion, it actually helps us to grow, to evolve, and to help us become better. So it's something I highly recommend everyone start to practice and to bring into your lives.
That's a beautiful representation to think about, because that is true. And I think a lot of times we don't think about how we should treat ourselves almost as we would talk to a child. And you mentioned conditioning, but like that's the same way to look at it too, is you're going to be conditioned based on how you talk to yourself, treat yourself. So that kindness is extremely important. That was beautiful. I thank you so much for joining us today. For our Core Happiness listeners, all of Dr. Sydney's contact information will be listed in the show notes, including her website, her social media, as well as the links that we've talked about today for her TEDx, her energy ebook, and her book, So Much Better. I thank you for joining me today. If you enjoyed this podcast, please feel free to rate it or leave a review. If you have any thoughts or questions, I would love to hear from you. You can email podcast@corehappiness.com. For show notes and additional resources, you can visit www.corehappiness.com. As always, please remember, never let anyone diminish your light. Until next time, sending you my love.